Hi everyone, this lecture is going to be about ggplot2 or the ggplot2 package. I'm going to talk about how to do some basic plots using the ggplot2 package and kind of what it's about. And then in the next lecture, I'll talk a little bit in more detail about kind of how it's designed and how you can make extensions to the various plotting functions. So first question, very basic, what is ggplot2? Basically, it's a package in R that you can download from CRAN, and it implements what's called the grammar of graphics, which was originally written by Leland Wilkinson and is described in a book called The Grammar of Graphics. Now, the grammar of graphics is a description of how kind of graphics can be broken down into abstract concepts. So think of the grammar of a language like English. You have things like verbs and nouns and adjectives. And so the question is, what are the verbs, nouns, and adjectives of a data graphic? And the grammar of graphics kind of describes kind of those basic elements so that you can put them together to make new types of graphics. Just like you could take a verb and a noun and an adjective and make a new sentence that maybe no one's ever heard before. You could take the grammar of graphics and put together various aspects of plots and make a graphic that no one's ever seen before. And so that's the basic idea. It's a very powerful concept to kind of organize all kinds of data graphics. Until recently, there was no specific implementation for it in R, but Hadley Wickham, who, when he was a graduate student at Iowa State, implemented the grammar of graphics as an R package called ggplot, and its current implementation is called ggplot2. So one can think of this as almost a third graphic system in R, even though it's built upon the grid graphic system, which comes with R. It's kind of a third mode of plotting that is it's become very popular. So if you think of the first mode as like the base plots using functions like plot and hist and box plot, and then the second mode as the lattice plot, so using xy plot and these kinds of trellis type functions, and then the third mode is ggplot. So you can get the package from CRAN. You can use install.packages, installs on almost all, I imagine on all systems, and you can go to the ggplot website, which is ggplot2.org. And so the nice thing about ggplot is that it is based on this grammar of graphics, and in a sense there's a theory of the graphics. So you can take this theory and kind of reassemble the different pieces to make new types of plots. And as Hadley Wickham says in his book, the basic idea is that you want to shorten the distance from the mind to the page. So if you have some data that you're looking at, and you think of a way that you want to visualize that data, you want to be able to rapidly take those ideas and turn them into a picture on your screen. So from the ggplot2 book, this sentence kind of summarizes the basic idea, but the idea is that the grammar tells us that a statistical graphic is a mapping from data to aesthetic attributes, so color, shape, and size, of geometric objects, so points, lines, and bars. And the plot may also contain statistical transformations of the data and is drawn on a specific coordinate system. So we have we have a mapping from data to aesthetics, geometric objects, we have statistics, and we have a coordinate system. So in this lecture, I just want to talk about the qplot function, which is kind of the most basic function, and it's probably the best place to start for someone who's transitioning from, say, the base plotting system. So in the base plotting system, the workhorse function is the plot function. And so qplot, which you can think of as standing for quick plot, is kind of the workhorse function for ggplot, and it's analogous to the plot function in the base system. So one key difference that you have to get used to when you're using ggplot is that typically when you make a plot and you pass data to the qplot function, you want to tell it where the data comes from, and the data will always come from a data frame. So a data frame is going to be, so your data have to be organized in a data frame. And then when you plot variables, those variables are going to come from the data frame. Now, you don't have to specify a data frame. You can, if you don't specify a data frame, the qplot function or all the plotting functions will look for the data in your workspace. But it's generally a good idea to specify the data frame. That way, when you read the code that generated the plot, you know exactly where the data came from. So the data frame is very important to organize before you start plotting. Once you start plotting, the plots are made up of aesthetics and geoms. And so aesthetics are things like the size, shape, and color of things, of points, and the geoms are kind of the objects that you're plotting. So are you plotting points? Are you plotting lines? Are you plotting bars? Whatnot. One aspect that's important for the qplot function, and also it's similarly important when you're using lattice functions, is the idea of using factor variables. So factors are very important because they indicate subsets of your data. So if you imagine you have a data frame where you have a y variable, an x variable, and then a factor variable, the factor will indicate subsets of your data in the data frame. So for example, you might have a factor that indicates the gender, so you have a bunch of males and a bunch of females. So those are subsets of your data. And you might want to plot a certain relationship divided by the various subsets. Or you might want to color certain points depending on whether they're male or female. And so the categories that are indicated by various factor variables can be useful for annotating a plot. And so one thing that's important about this feature is that when you have factor variables in a data set, you want to make sure that they're properly labeled. So it's usually not useful to label a factor variable as 1, 2, and 3. Even if you have 3 categories, 1, 2, and 3 is not particularly informative. Usually you want to label them with more informative labels so that you know what those factor variables are trying to encode. Now, the qplot function is a fairly straightforward function to use. I think it's very easy to pick up. It hides a lot of the details of what ggplot is doing underneath, which is fine for many cases. But the ggplot function is really kind of the core function of the system. It's very flexible, and you can use it in combination with a lot of things that qplot can't do.